Hi, YouTube. My podcast is available all over the place, but this intro's just for you. I'm Kay, and it's my goal to teach you whatever I can about writing in 10 ish minutes. My K Talks Writing podcast is all about fiction writing tips and advice. Stick around and give it a listen, and I'm sure you'll get something out of it. Hello, everyone. I'm Kay, and this is Kay Talks Writing, where I take what I've learned from my career as a writer and educator and compress it into quick lessons that you can apply right away. Give a quick listen, and hopefully, in a few minutes, you'll be just a bit better of a writer. Episode 2, I am talking about planning and outlining, which I know to a lot of people sounds like taking all the fun out of it. I understand that. I used to be that way too, and I still am sometimes. I started writing out of a love for stories, and a lot of that was discovering the next big plot point, the next emotional character moment. And there's nothing like the experience of discovering that with your own hands on the keyboard. It can feel a lot like watching the perfect movie. Everything happens exactly how it feels like it should. But I've found that feeling can be deceptive. Winging it can be fun and lead to some engaging writing, but it can also lead to dead-end plots, botched details, bad pacing, and inconsistent characters. Now, those of us who write on the fly will be quick to point out that all of that can be fixed in rewrites, and of course it can. Anything can be. That's a perfectly valid way to write. In fact, I kind of wonder why people argue so much about it. When I was just starting out as a writer in my local writers guild, there was a lot of debate and argument about the best way to go about plotting. Planners thought that writing without a plan meant the first draft was a waste of time, an elongated brainstorm that at best approximated an outline, whereas the improvisers thought that planning took the authenticity and excitement out of the story and made it a stale march to a rote conclusion. Neither of these extremes is completely true, but if you look at them, you can probably suss out the pros and cons of both. And as long as they've both got pros and cons, why not take advantage of those? These days, I'm very much into both planning and making it up as I go along, doing both of those things equally at the same time in the same projects. If that sounds like it doesn't make sense, then that's good, because it shouldn't. It's alchemy. It shouldn't work. It does work, but it shouldn't. And I love that I have a writing formula that offends the natural order of the art. It all started one winter in Colorado. I just lost my job at a Panera Cafe and started working on my great fantasy epic, as young men who have lost their jobs so often do. I had an idea for an exciting novel full of airship battles and magic duels, but I wasn't going to ruin the fun by outlining it. 2 weeks later, I was 50,000 words in, roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the length of your typical epic fantasy draft, and I was about halfway through my very first airship battle, mainly from the point of view of unimportant side characters that were just doing cool airship things that I wanted to write about. I was having a great time, and the writing was fine on a page-to-page scale, but that wasn't going to become a novel anytime soon. Worse yet, when I went back and reread what I'd written, I hadn't actually achieved any important plot points or cool moments of character development. The characters were fine, and the action was great, but I was so caught up in what I was writing that I forgot that cool airship battles need a plot to prop them up. Now, I'm not trying to say I was doing anything wrong or bad. Being able to get this into the writing of a scene and being able to enjoy the process this much is a talent that I wouldn't trade for anything. One of my favorite things about writing, and one of the greatest assets I have as an artist. I just needed to figure out how to channel that a bit. Only a bit. I wanted as little structure as possible, so all I did was, before I started writing the next page, I made a short list of the things I wanted to do on that page. That's character moments, a plot point or two, and an important image or a rule of cool airship explosion or something. I didn't look at my list while writing. I just finished the page, then checked back, and I saw that I'd accomplished probably less than half of my list. But I had accomplished a couple of things, which was a lot more than I had been doing, and all it took was pausing for a second to think just one single page in advance. And it also kept me aware, going forward, of what my story was and was not doing. Things I missed on one page got pushed off to the next, and I kind of slowly became aware that what I was actually doing was writing more of a Dunkirk-style novel about a single battle instead of a great spanning epic. Nothing wrong with that. I did eventually abandon the novel, though. Not because it was bad, but because I was in my 20s and hadn't yet figured out how to finish what I began. There is no such thing as wasted writing, though, so don't worry about that. The characters and plot beats live on, zombified, in modern projects. It took me something like 10 years of using similar methods, just listing out objectives one page, a few pages, maybe a chapter ahead, before I finally started making these lists of things I should probably include in the story before I even began the story. And in that, I had successfully reinvented outlining my story. I had finished my evolution from an improviser to a planner, but I hadn't actually abandoned my improvisational nature. See, I had gotten used to making these plans in list form, but as of about age 30, I hadn't yet figured out how to actually follow these plans, or even if I wanted to. Because I didn't need to actually follow the outline for it to do the job of improving my writing. I would make a list, write for a while, reference my list, and then make a new list based on what I had actually written, which is not how planning-addicted writers say you should do it. The planners in my Writers Guild would say that you need to plan moment by moment, write according to your plan, and if something doesn't go according to plan, then you delete that something. I was doing that kind of backwards. If my writing didn't follow the outline, I would delete and amend the outline. It worked really well for me, and I think I was getting most of the pros of each method without getting the cons. I was staying aware of what was happening in my novel, I was planning out character arcs and keeping track of those arcs, and I was executing well-paced plot points, but I was also letting myself get wrapped up in excitement that kept my narration engaging, allowing my characters to speak to me in unexpected ways, and taking hold of valuable plot threads that planners might overlook. And, since I was constantly revising my outline as I went, my improvised moments didn't fade into nothing once I was past them, and I didn't lose track of what I was doing. I was watching the story's eventual climax and conclusion change shape as I approached them, a bit like holding a snake by its head and working my way toward the rattle hand over hand. The only real con, I think, was that I'd eventually have to come back and rewrite the beginning to better set up for the end I ended up writing. Do you remember in the last episode I mentioned that space opera that I had to revise because I didn't get around to revealing the protagonist's backstory until too late in the novel? Well, this is why. Elements of that backstory were still appearing in my head as I neared the conclusion. The end informed the beginning as much as the beginning informed the end. But every novel requires rewrites, so to me, this anomaly is worth it. For others, of course, it would not be worth it. And to those planners who have a character's backstory fully established before they commit a single word to the actual novel draft, I can only say, have you ever tried not doing that? I'm not trying to rant against planning. I think I just did the opposite. I love planning. I'm constantly planning, and in my career, I'm constantly being reminded of the value that planning has. But I also believe in the power of whim and chemistry, especially in character moments. This might just be because I'm an overly emotional reader and writer who needs to vibe with my characters in order to get the tone of my scene right, but I feel like any romance, bromance, or rivalry I tried to plan ahead of time would come off as dry and forced. In fact, I recently had this experience where I thought I'd try to write an action romance, and when the two protagonists met, their chemistry was absolutely weird. And if I kept going with it, I was going to end up writing some Othello-style paranoid tragedy. I can't plan my way around that kind of thing, and I shouldn't, and I wouldn't want to. There's a lot of narrative power in letting things go off the rails, as long as you're ready to set up new rails and chase it down to its inevitable conclusion. Plus, it's a lot of fun, and it's become my favorite way to write. Setting up outlines and then knocking them down is a lot like kicking out the bottom of a house of cards. There's power in it, and it can be fun to wrangle the disaster outline after outline, keeping a record of just how much power the broken plans are putting into the story. If you're a planner who's never improvised your way out of your outline and seen it fall to ruin, I think you're missing out. And if you're an improviser who's never lassoed your story and tried to steer its momentum, I think you're missing out too. You know, I bet you guys thought I was going to tell you how to format a detailed outline to reconcile your character arcs and themes with your pacing and plan out hooks to draw your readers in. Maybe I'll do an episode like that another time. I've taught that kind of thing in the past, and I've even used and destroyed such detailed outlines, but right now I'm back to making lists. Lately, I'm writing serial novels, and all I'm doing is keeping a running list at the end of my document that says what events will probably happen in the next 4 or 5 chapters, with 1 or 2 essential character moments that I think I'd like to land, but knowing me, will probably bounce like a rock off the surface of the story and crash into a completely different moment that hits twice as hard. Now, on my way out, here's a reminder that I'm Kay, and this has been Kay Talks Writing, where it's my goal to teach you whatever I can about fiction writing, knowing that we all come differently to this big, complicated art we love. Hopefully you've found some part of this helpful. The background music is by a composer called Safk, that's S-A-V-F-K. Look him up at youtube.com/safkmusic. I've got no sponsors to tell you about, no greater purpose to talk you into, and I don't know how to use social media. For now, try outlining something short and then writing that outline into oblivion. You might really enjoy yourself, or at least learn something new about your approach to storytelling. Have fun with that, and please consider giving this podcast a like, a follow, a heart, a green arrow, a repod, an uptoot, or whatever they're called on the platform you're listening on, and come back and listen again next time. Bye for now. Alright, I'm back for the outro. Listen, being a full-time writer isn't easy these days. I'm sure many of you know that just as well as I do. So I'm going to ask for just a little bit of help. I'm not going to send you to buy my book or donate money. For me, as a writer and an educator, the thing I want most of all is an audience. And the biggest thing standing in my way is a robotic gatekeeper called the algorithm. The best way you can help me today is with a like on the video, a comment on the video, and a subscription to the channel. These are all incredibly helpful. If you want to leave a comment, just let me know if I've said anything you find useful, or if you have some questions about the writing craft or business, drop it in the comment section and I'll see it. Thanks so much for watching and listening, and I hope you come back for another episode. There's more every week. Have a great day and happy writing.